What's going on, guys, and welcome to another tutorial here on our channel, The Guide. My name is Valerio, but before we get into the tutorial for today, I wanted to let you guys know about the online course that The Guide has officially released. The most important thing is that there will be absolutely no changes to the content that you can expect for free on YouTube. We will carry on these tutorials as usual. However, the online course is something different. It consists of 25 videos that teach you timeless fundamentals beyond the FIFA pitch that can be applied to any FIFA game. It'll involve more abstract concepts that pros themselves use but don't necessarily share. So if you're interested, check out all the links in the descriptions. And as viewers from YouTube, you can use promo code THEGUIDE for a 10% discount. Today, however, we are continuing on the concept of wingplay because there are so many factors involved when playing off the wing, especially because a lot of you guys were talking about cutbacks in the comments. And in fact, today's topic is about cutting back, cutbacks, and everything in between. Now, of course, this is essentially a continuation to the wingplay video that we've covered. So if you haven't seen that already, I would suggest going back, as that video gives you guys the ability to be comfortable on the wing and then come to the final conclusions of your attack that we're going to be discussing today. So getting accustomed to wingplay creates more opportunities for you guys offensively. Now, knowing what to do on the wing will make the difference between scoring those goals or just simply letting chances slip by. And today we'll discuss the factors you need to consider, whether you need to be taking a driven pass, whether you need to avoid using the driven pass as effective as it may be, whether you should be cutting on the inside, whether you should be cutting the byline, or whether you should be trying to approach the center even earlier than usual. So without further ado, let's get into when to driven pass, when to ground pass, and learning to know where exactly to cut inside or push from the byline when on the wing. Cutting back and scoring via driven passes is a topic that can go off on many tangents, and we can sit here and discuss many different variables that go into that process. And the basic foundation that you'll need was already covered in a previous video we posted on our channel, and I definitely recommend all of you to watch that first before you continue on with this one. And we showed the classic driven pass into a box as a good goal scoring method. And of course, as we mentioned previously, the basic ideas of when you should be driven passing in a cutback consist of factors like the distance between you and your teammate, like what your teammate is doing, and whether or not he is in a situation that allows him to receive the ball at his feet. But not only that, there's much more to it. So again, we cover all of that in depth in a dedicated video. A small extra trick, however, that we can share today regarding when to driven pass relates to the idea of pushing the byline to its absolute limit. Now, the further and deeper you get into the wing, and thus the closer to the byline you get, the more effective doing a driven pass into the box will be. And this is not only because in these areas you, number one, tend to be at a good distance from your players, and number two, your players will be done running into space and thus ready to receive the ball to their feet, but also because the key to a driven pass cutback lies with taking the extra fraction of a second to dribble. The extra dribble that most people don't do is the difference in FIFA 20 between this type of situation, this type of cutback, working or not. In this example, we'll clearly be able to see this. And here, my opponent rushes in with a slide tackle, and because of my position, I know that I have nothing to worry about or rush. Worst case scenario, I lose the ball in a pretty safe area to lose it in. I change nothing with my plan, I don't flinch, and I take the extra dribble. And not only does it get me away from the defender that was sliding into me, but it also makes the timing perfect for the pass. It was indeed the extra dribble that made sure I passed just after the center back covering my teammate had jockeyed one step too far for his sake, which opens the passing lane that I was initially looking for. Had I performed this pass a fraction of a second too early, it wouldn't have reached the target. Like I mentioned earlier, as useful as the driven pass is in the situations highlighted earlier on in the video, it isn't to be confused for a tool to just be spammed in all situations. There will be times where you can cut back from the wing and there will be no need for you to perform a driven pass. Just like before, there are certain factors that play a role in deeming whether or not to use the driven pass, or in this case, the normal ground pass. The first thing to consider is whether or not you've turned back. So the same way we talked about how attacking the byline leads to situations where a driven pass is useful, if you decide to turn back and start dribbling towards the inside, you'll find that performing a normal ground pass to cutback is the right decision, and that's due to a variety of reasons. The first is the distance, once again, and this is in complete contrast to the earlier section of the video where we mentioned the driven pass works best at medium range distances. In these situations, however, you can see how the distance is shorter and narrower, so there is no need for a driven pass. In fact, it might actually hinder the situation and cause some unfortunate touches. Next up is the fact that a lot of the times when you turn back and cut inside, you might notice a lingering player behind you who is attacking the space in the box. So if earlier we talked about how attacking from the byline gave you opportunities to pass into strikers who needed the ball to their feet, thus requiring a driven pass, now that you've got lingering runners who require the ball into space, a normal ground pass works better than the driven pass. And it's the slower pace of the ball and the way the trajectories work that make this the go-to choice when cutting back in these specific situations. On top of everything that we've mentioned so far, time is also something that you have to consider. The driven pass is fast once the ball leaves the feet of the passer, but when performing it, you'll know it takes that extra fraction of a second more to load up and execute. As a result, in situations where you need to let go of the ball as fast as possible, the ground pass is a much better solution. In this scenario, after a series of dribbles, we find ourselves with the opposing keeper diving towards us, and a driven pass would have had the ball travel away from the keeper and towards my player that I'm aiming to faster, but the time it would have taken to charge up and execute would have been slower, at least in the initial part of the execution. So a quick tap of the ground pass, while it results in a slower overall trajectory of the ball, it does allow us to get rid of the ball faster, which in this case was a priority over anything else. So even though we know that driven passing works best when attacking the byline and a normal pass works well when cutting inside, how can you tell where you should attack from? How can you tell if you should be attacking the depths of the wing or if you should be cutting back inside? Now obviously experience will always help you improve in this regard, as well as being aware that you should always mix it up. Don't just keep the approach the same every time. But that being said, the main factor to consider is your ability to be aware of space. Always keep in mind where the space lies, and be it via left stick dribbling or skill moves, move towards that area of the box. The following examples give a basic understanding of this, and here we end up on the byline with Messi. The box doesn't really have any great options, and all the space appears to be towards the outside. The best way to access it is thus to cut inside and forget about pushing the byline. Simply left stick dribbling our way so that our body ends up being positioned towards that space then allows us to eventually find the runner in Figo and get the easy shot off. Opposite situation here where the space dictated that pushing the byline was the best choice. The bulk of the space is near to the center of the box ahead of the two defenders, and on top of that, our player is clearly making a push for that area. This circumstance then pushes us to try and get as close to the byline as possible, rather than cutting back into an area where another defender was there ready for our opponent to switch into, and then we simply driven pass across the box for the easy finish. Those are really basic examples to help build your foundation and ability to attack and recognize where the space is. Once you face tougher opponents, it all becomes more difficult, and where you can and should be going can change multiple times in the same play. Here, we're on the wing with Neymar, and again, the space dictates that we should stop pushing the byline and look to start cutting inside. We do that, however, our opponent is of a higher skill level and he reads that. He moves his defender accordingly to block our movement to cut inside. Recognizing that our defender noticed this is super important, and you have to do it fast enough because you can simply redirect your intentions, especially now that the space dictates that pushing the ball to the byline has now become more efficient in the fraction of a second. We make the adjustment, find the space on the byline, and we put in a dangerous, fast-paced ball that leads to a goal.
Now, a lot of emphasis in this video focuses on cutbacks from the byline, and even when we spoke about cutting inside, we did so from pretty deep in the field. There is, however, a third method of cutting back, and it complements the first two that we spoke about really well because you perform it much earlier in the play, and your opponent may thus not expect it, especially if you've been pushing the byline the whole match. Sometimes, despite there being clear space ahead of you for you to get deeper in the field, you might also notice that cutting inside right at that second, and so much earlier than usual, would result in getting the ball centrally and forcing a 2v2 situation or something similar, and no pressure from behind from opposing midfielders behind you. In these situations, this then becomes a third option, really useful for variety in throwing your opponent off and forcing your opponent again to defend with his backline on the edge of his box.
Mastering cutbacks will be the cherry on top of the cake that is Wingplay. It allows you to add the end product from a different part of the pitch than usual. And as we discussed today, factors like distance, teammate positioning, time, and whether or not you're attacking from the byline or cutting inside will all play a role together in understanding when the passes to go for on your cutbacks should be performed with a fast-paced driven pass or a normal ground pass. On top of that, it's important to remember that sometimes you can encounter weird situations where you perform a pass from the wing to cut inside and it fails because your player simply fails to lock onto it. Even though you thought it was an easy trap, it can happen. In other situations, you also have to be careful in how you aim with your left stick, especially to lingering players on the edge of the box. If you're not extremely accurate, even if you see the lingering player with your eyes on the edge of the box, you'll fail the pass and not get the desired angle. With time and experience, you'll get more accustomed to these things, and your overall accuracy and decision making will obviously improve. Nonetheless, that's going to be it from me today. I hope this answered you guys' questions regarding how to perform cutbacks from the wing, and if it did, be sure to drop a like and subscribe. I'll catch you guys next time.